Welcome back. In our last few episodes, we explored some fascinating topics that set the stage for today's discussion. Remember when we delved into Instruct GPT? That episode was all about how human feedback helps fine-tune models to follow instructions better. And just recently, we talked about scaling laws, explaining how model performance improves with more data, parameters, and compute. These foundational ideas directly connect to what we're discussing today.
Right. And wasn't there also an episode on MLE Bench? I recall it focused on how models can improve through iterative problem solving. That seems pretty relevant to what we'll be covering, doesn't it?
Absolutely. All those episodes touched on a core concept we're taking even further today, enhancing language models through internal reasoning. And that brings us to the core of today's topic, the Thinking LLMs paper.
Sounds intriguing. So, what makes thinking LLMs different from the other methods we've talked about?
Great question. The key contribution here is thought preference optimization, TPO, which trains models not only to generate responses but to think internally before responding. It's about enhancing models with iterative thinking that refines their answers across diverse tasks, not just logic-heavy ones.
I see. So it's more than just following instructions. It's about improving the quality of reasoning itself.
Exactly. It even aims to broaden the utility of AI across areas like marketing, health, and general knowledge. The interesting twist is that it achieves this with AI-based feedback instead of human-labeled thought data, making it more scalable.
That's pretty innovative. So, can you give us a quick guide on what to expect in today's episode?
Sure, first, we'll unpack how the Thinking LLMs approach builds on earlier alignment methods. Then, we'll dive into the technical details of TPO and how internal reasoning is optimized. Finally, we'll look at its performance across different domains, including the broader implications for AI research.
Sounds like a lot to cover. I'm curious about how this method performs in the real world.
Exactly, and we'll get to that soon. Let's transition now into the core content, starting with a deeper look at how internal thought processes can reshape AI's ability to follow instructions. Let's start with an overview of the abstract. It explains the aim of the paper, which is to improve how large language models, LLMs, handle complex tasks through explicit thinking before responding, rather than directly outputting answers. This approach is seen as crucial for tasks that require reasoning, planning, or creativity, making it applicable across different domains, not just traditional logic tasks.
So, the goal is to make these models think more like humans, right? They need to reason internally before providing answers.
Exactly. The authors suggest a training method to develop this ability, termed thought preference optimization, TPO. It's a process where LLMs are trained to generate internal thoughts before giving responses, improving performance without requiring extra human data.
Interesting. How does this TPO work, then?
Good question. TPO is an iterative process. The model generates a variety of possible thoughts, and each of these thoughts gets evaluated by a separate judge model, self. Only the best performing thoughts and responses are used to further refine the LLM through preference optimization.
So, it's like trying different solutions and learning from the best one?
That's right. It's akin to a feedback loop where the model gradually improves its thinking and response generation. The main innovation here is that the LLM learns to think internally, improving output quality without human-curated training data.
I see. And the results? Did this new training method perform well?
Yes, according to the abstract, the model performed better on benchmarks like AlpacaEvil and ArenaHard compared to standard LLMs without explicit thinking. Interestingly, it also showed improvements in non-reasoning domains, such as marketing, health, and general knowledge, suggesting that thinking can be broadly useful.
That's quite impressive. It's not just about math or logic, but also creative tasks, then.
Correct. The TPO method demonstrates that thinking can enhance general instruction following capabilities in diverse contexts, making LLMs more versatile. All right, moving forward from the abstract, let's dive into the introduction. This section sets the foundation by explaining the structure and limitations of current large language models, LLMs. The introduction emphasizes that LLMs are built on the transformer architecture, where the model predicts the next token step by step. However, each token prediction takes a fixed amount of compute, regardless of the instruction's complexity, S8. This can be a limitation, especially for complex queries.
So, the model uses the same resources for both simple and difficult tasks. It doesn't allocate more processing to harder tasks.
Exactly. It's like trying to solve a complicated math problem with the same effort as a simple arithmetic task. The introduction suggests that, to handle harder instructions, LLMs need to think internally before generating responses, similar to how humans pause and think before answering tough questions.
That makes sense. Is this why the concept of generating thoughts as text is introduced?
Yes, precisely. Generating thoughts in natural language helps LLMs utilize their pre-trained knowledge on human-like thinking. The introduction mentions chain of thought, COOT, prompting, which guides the model to write down reasoning steps. But COIT has mostly been effective in math and logic tasks.
I see. COT seems quite useful for logical reasoning. But does the introduction suggest that thinking could be broader than that?
Correct. The authors argue that thinking should be beneficial across various tasks, not just logical ones. For instance, in creative writing, internal thoughts help plan plot structures, while in instruction following, they assist in better understanding user requirements. The key idea is that more complex tasks likely need more thinking, whereas simpler tasks require less.
Interesting approach. So, they're trying to apply this thinking to all kinds of instructions, not just logical tasks?
Exactly. The focus here is general instruction following, aiming for broad utility rather than specialization in logic. However, the introduction acknowledges challenges in training such models. It points out the lack of supervised data for thoughts, since pre-training data often excludes internal reasoning. Moreover, the cost of gathering human thought data adds to the difficulty.
So, it's not just about developing the method, but also overcoming the training challenges?
That's right. And that's why the introduction sets up the need for innovative methods like thought preference optimization, TEPO, to train models to think without requiring explicit thought annotations or extra data.
Got it. The groundwork here seems to set up the motivation for the proposed TPO approach.
Exactly. The introduction is all about establishing the need for models that can think across diverse tasks and the challenges of achieving that with the current data landscape. Now that we've covered the basics from the introduction, let's transition to the core methodology of this paper. Thought Preference Optimization, TPO. The TPO method is designed to teach large language models, LLMs, to generate internal thoughts before providing responses. The process starts with an instruction-tuned LLM that typically outputs responses directly after receiving user input. The idea is to introduce internal thoughts to improve responses, even when there's no labeled thought data available for training.
So, they begin with a regular LLM that has been trained to follow instructions, and then modify it to add thoughts before answers.
Exactly. The model is prompted to generate both a thought process and a response for a given user instruction. These outputs are sampled multiple times, and the responses are evaluated by a judge model. The best-performing thought and response pairs are then used to refine the model through preference optimization.
How does this preference optimization work? Do they use human feedback for it?
No, that's an interesting aspect of TPO. The model doesn't rely on human-labeled thoughts or responses. Instead, it uses an AI-based judge model that evaluates only the responses, without seeing the thought process. The optimization process's indirect thoughts are refined based on how much they improve the final response quality.
That makes it different from approaches that need human-curated data, right? It seems more scalable.
Precisely. It avoids the costly process of collecting human-labeled data, making it feasible to train models at scale. The optimization is conducted iteratively. The best responses are paired with the thoughts that led to them, while the less effective pairs are discarded. This iterative refinement helps the model learn which internal thoughts produce better outputs.
Is there any specific format for these thought prompts during training?
Yes, there are two main types of prompts: generic and specific. The generic prompt simply instructs the model to write its thoughts before responding, while the specific prompt asks for a more structured approach like writing a draft response and evaluating it. This helps enforce a clear format so that the response can be separated from the thought part.
Why is it necessary to separate thoughts from responses?
The separation is mainly for user experience. In most cases, users expect a clear, concise answer rather than seeing the intermediate reasoning. Keeping the thought process hidden allows it to be more exploratory, like making mistakes or evaluating different drafts without confusing the user.
That's helpful for ensuring the model's outputs are more polished. So, is there any performance data to show how well TPO works?
Yes, the results are promising. On benchmarks like Alpaca Eval and Arena Hard, TL outperforms models that generate direct responses without explicit thinking. Interestingly, it not only helps with reasoning tasks, but also with areas like marketing, general knowledge, and health, indicating that this thinking approach has broad applicability. Now that we've laid out the basics of TPO, let's move on to how it performs in the experiments. The experiments start by detailing the setup. The researchers used the Llama 3-8B instruct model as the base, with two types of judge models: Self-Taught Evaluator, SAINT, and ARMO-RM. The training instructions initially came from synthetic datasets, then switched to ultra-feedback for more realistic, human-like instructions.
So, the model starts with a basic instruction set, then moves to a more human-centered dataset. What's the significance of switching to ultra feedback?
Great question. Ultra feedback provides more diverse, real-world instructions, which helps the model generalize better. It's especially useful for fine-tuning how the model handles varied instructions. In this setup, the model was trained iteratively across 4 rounds, with around 5,000 instructions in each round.
And what about the evaluation benchmarks? I remember Alpaca Eval and Arena Hard were mentioned.
Yes, those are the primary benchmarks. Both are designed to test general instruction following capabilities, not just reasoning or logic tasks. Alpaca Eval evaluates with length-controlled responses, meaning longer responses don't automatically score higher. Arena Hard is similar but focuses on even more challenging tasks.
How did the TPO model perform on Alpaca Eval compared to the direct response baseline?
On Alpaca Eval, the TPO model reached a win rate of 52.5%, outperforming the direct response model by 4.1%. It even marked a 27.6% improvement over the seed model, placing third on the leaderboard, just behind larger models like GPT-4 Omni and GPT-4 Turbo.
That's impressive, especially considering its smaller size. How about Arena Hard?
Arena Hard presented similar trends. The TPO model achieved a win rate of 37.3%, surpassing the direct baseline by 4.3%. This performance puts it in line with larger models like Mistral Large and GPT-4.
So, TPO performs well not only on reasoning tasks, but also in broader instruction following challenges.
Exactly. And it's not just about handling complex tasks. It also shows promise in other areas like marketing, health, and general knowledge. This indicates that thinking before responding can enhance versatility across diverse instruction types. Now that we have a sense of how TPO performs on broader benchmarks, let's delve into more detailed evaluations and analyses to understand the model's strengths and limitations. The fine-grained evaluation breaks down model performance across 20 instruction categories, using unseen instructions from ultra feedback. These categories include language and translation, marketing, health, reasoning, and more. Interestingly, TPO shows improvements not just in traditional reasoning tasks, but also in non-reasoning domains like marketing and health.
So, thinking helps with categories beyond logic and reasoning? That's surprising.
It is. The fine-grained evaluation shows that language models benefit from thinking in diverse contexts. For instance, tasks like creative writing or personal development also see gains. This broad utility suggests that explicit thought can aid in tasks traditionally not associated with reasoning, which is quite encouraging.
Did the model perform consistently across all 20 categories? I see. What about the analysis of thought lengths? Does that affect performance?
Good observation. Thought length plays a role. The specific thought prompt typically produces longer thoughts, since it involves drafting and evaluating responses. However, the model learns to condense thoughts over iterations, making them shorter and more efficient without losing quality. This balancing act is crucial to maintain response clarity and avoid verbosity, especially in non-reasoning tasks.
And were there any ablation studies mentioned?
Yes, several ablation studies were conducted to understand the impact of different factors. For example, the researchers compared generic versus specific thought prompts. While the specific prompt led to slightly better scores, it also generated longer responses. This trade-off indicates that specific prompts are more detailed but could add unnecessary length. Building from our experimental analysis, let's now shift to the related work, which helps contextualize thought preference optimization (TPO) within the broader landscape of LLM development. This section starts by discussing reasoning approaches in language models, focusing primarily on two contrasting styles: reasoning in natural language versus reasoning in continuous vectors. The authors argue that while reasoning in continuous values can offer more bandwidth, thinking in natural language aligns better with LLM's pre-training data, which is rich in human-like textual reasoning.
So, using words for reasoning makes better use of the model's existing strengths, right?
Exactly. The advantage of word tokens is that they can be fed back to the model during inference, enabling future computations to condition on them. This is unlike hidden vector states, which aren't accessible for further token predictions.
That makes sense. Are there other methods mentioned for improving reasoning in LLMs?
Yes, a major one is chain of thought, COT prompting, which asks models to write down intermediate reasoning steps. COT has been quite effective in tasks like math and logic. However, the meta-analysis cited in the paper shows that COT techniques offer limited benefits for non-reasoning tasks, which is why methods like TPO are being explored for broader applicability.
It seems COT is more focused on specific logic tasks. How does TPO differ from COT in its training approach?
TPO differs primarily in how it optimizes thoughts iteratively without requiring labeled thought data. Previous methods like STAR and self-notes rely on supervised training with labeled thoughts, which can be limiting and costly. TPO, on the other hand, uses AI feedback to evaluate only the responses, optimizing thoughts indirectly.
I see. So, TPO offers a more scalable alternative by skipping direct supervision of the thought process.
Exactly. It's more flexible and not restricted to reasoning-heavy tasks. Additionally, TPO can adjust to various domains, including non-reasoning ones like marketing, health, and general knowledge, unlike other approaches that specialize in logical reasoning.
Are there any comparisons with other recent methods for general instruction following?
Yes, the paper mentions System 2 methods, which insert intermediate steps like verification before generating a final answer. These steps typically rely on handcrafted prompts and do not optimize via fine-tuning, unlike TPO. Concurrent works like QuietStar and self-correction models are more focused on specific problem-solving skills, not general thinking.
That's interesting. It seems like TPO offers a more comprehensive approach for instruction following LLMs.
Absolutely. The related work highlights TPO's potential to generalize across diverse tasks, addressing gaps left by previous methods, especially in non-reasoning domains. Having explored the experimental results and related work, let's conclude with a summary of the main findings and implications of the study. The paper introduces a new approach called Thinking LLMs, where language models think in natural language before generating responses. This thinking process is made possible through a novel training method called Thought Preference Optimization, TPO, which aims to improve instruction-following performance across both reasoning and non-reasoning tasks.
So, the main focus is on making LLMs think through natural language, rather than using continuous vectors or other abstract representations?
Exactly. The emphasis is on leveraging the language model's strengths, given that they're already trained on massive amounts of human-like text data. By generating internal thoughts, the model can refine its responses, which the experiments showed led to better performance on benchmarks like AlpacaEval and ArenaHard.
And what about the scalability of TPO? Does it really eliminate the need for human-labeled thought data?
Yes, that's one of the major strengths of TPO. The model iteratively improves its thoughts through AI-based evaluations rather than requiring human annotations. This makes it a more scalable and cost-effective solution for training LLMs to handle a wider range of instructions.
How did TPO perform compared to traditional models?
The TPO models outperformed traditional direct response models, especially in later training iterations. The approach showed promise not only in reasoning tasks, but also in areas like marketing, creative writing, and health, indicating its broader applicability. Fine-grained evaluations also revealed that explicit thinking was beneficial in non-reasoning domains, which is a significant finding.
It sounds like TPO could be quite transformative for future LLMs. Are there any notable limitations mentioned?
Yes, the paper notes some limitations. For instance, TPO's math performance was lower compared to other reasoning-focused models, likely due to the lower representation of math tasks in the training data. Additionally, the model's thought length is not currently adjustable, which affects computation costs. The authors suggest exploring more diverse thought prompts and adaptive thought lengths in future iterations to further enhance performance.
Overall, it seems like TPO has set a new direction for LLMs. It makes them not just more accurate, but also more versatile across different tasks.
That's a fair summary. TPO demonstrates the potential of thinking LLMs to adapt across a wider range of applications, making them better suited for real-world instruction-following tasks. Moving on from the conclusion, it's also important to understand the limitations of the proposed approach, thought preference optimization, TPO. The authors highlight several limitations of TPO, beginning with the observation that different types of thought prompts may be more suitable for certain tasks. For example, some tasks may benefit more from direct responses than from a thought-driven approach. This suggests that TPO might be more effective if models could switch between multiple prompt types, but the current setup doesn't support this adaptability.
So, training on a diverse set of prompts could help the model choose the most appropriate thoughts, but they haven't explored this possibility yet.
Exactly. They mention this as a potential area for future research. Allowing the model to search through various thought types could enhance performance further.
What about performance in specific tasks? Were there any issues noted there? I see. Were there any other technical challenges mentioned, like response length or computation costs?
Good point. Another limitation is the lack of control over the length of generated thoughts. Currently, the model determines its own thought length, which can lead to longer responses that increase computation costs per user instruction. Implementing a mechanism for adjusting thought lengths, perhaps using techniques proposed by Yuan et al. 2024, could help manage this issue.
And did they test TPO on larger models, or was it limited to smaller ones?
All experiments were conducted using 8 billion parameter models, so the effects of TPO on larger models remain unknown. Testing on larger-scale models could provide insights into how well TPO scales and whether its benefits persist with increased model sizes. But this wasn't explored due to computational constraints. And that wraps up our discussion on thinking LLMs. We've covered how thought preference optimization enhances internal reasoning, its impact on model performance across various tasks, and its potential to make AI more adaptable and scalable.
It was really interesting to see how iterative thinking can improve models, not just for logic-heavy tasks, but also for broader applications like marketing and health. The shift from human-based to AI-based feedback was a surprising yet promising approach.
Definitely. It's a big step towards more aligned and versatile AI systems. But there are still open questions about fine-tuning these models to minimize biases and further boost performance without an alignment tax.
Right. And it'll be exciting to see how future research tackles those challenges.
Absolutely. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it insightful. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to having you with us in our next episode.
Until then, keep exploring the world of AI.